Hi, Barn.
How's the fishing?
Fine. How's everything around here?
Busy.
Busy doing what?
All different things.
Well, what?
Oh, the phone, the mail, filing, cleaning up. The phone, taking out the trash. Seems like that trash gets heavier every week. Some people coming in and out.
What people?
Well, first one, then another.
You didn't get a chance to fix that stop sign down on Elm Street.
I didn't get a chance to do that. I was so busy. I'll do that right now.
Yeah. Did you forget something, Bart?
No.
Barney? Looking for these?
Oh, you're a clown, you are. Why don't you put a red light on your nose and go in the circus?
Oh, Barney, I don't care if you take a little nap once in a while. I was just picking at you.
You're a regular Felix the Cat.
We were talking. I knew they were very familiar with church leadership and things, and so we were talking. And I can remember one time we were going out to lunch, and it was like the light bulb came on, and he said this. He says, Rod, I finally figured it out. You act and have a mentality like everything depends on you. But you pray and give credit like everything depends on God. There's a tension here. There's a tension. If you have ever been a student and you have walked into the classroom ready to take a test, you understand that tension. Because if you have not studied, you prayed that God would step up and do a miracle and turn emptiness into knowledge. God, please be with me during this test. Please do. And you don't pray, God, bring to mind what I have studied. That's a no-no prayer. Because you were praying that maybe God would do it all. And then there's other times when we think we do it all. There's this tension that builds, and it actually sets about our future. There are futures with God and without God as far as in our thinking. There's a story that Jesus would tell, and Jesus would tell about a guy that built barns, and he didn't understand, he didn't see what the future was. It was just the next thing in front of him, and he had a good harvest, and so he ended up planning the rest of his life by just building bigger and better barns. And Jesus said that God kind of pronounced a judgment on him, saying, you fool, you've not taken any thought of your life. You've not seen God in your life. This very night, your soul will be required. So there's that tension of doing everything on your own and keeping God out of the equation. There's the other tension of just hoping that God will do everything. God, here's my checkbook. Please make it balance. God, I'm just, and it's just kind of going blind through life. I think the model of this, both the planning and God involvement, would be a story out of the Old Testament, out of the left side of the book of Genesis, the story of Joseph. When he knew that there was something coming, he knew that what was right now wouldn't be forever. That the plenty that was now would not always be that way. There are going to be ebbs and flows. And so he planned, And because of his leadership, because of what he did, God used it to save a nation, both Jew and Gentile, both Jew and Egyptian. He used it to deliver them. He used that planning and that drought and that season of not having much to reunite him with his family. And he would say this, he would say, that his brothers meant for evil, God used for good. And so this morning, I want us to cover two passages of Scripture that say the same thing. And it's going to be more obvious. I saw this, and I thought this was pretty good right here. Notice to riders. You got to, in this day, in 2021, you have to put a notice to riders. Failure to be at the bus stop at the scheduled time will result in missing the bus. Seems obvious. But sometimes you got to tell people, if you're not there when the bus is there, you're going to miss the bus. You have to state the obvious. And more and more people are doing that. Can I just say this? My son and I had an argument. And the argument was over how tough his generation has it and how easy my generation had it. Don't tell anybody. This was the argument. And I'm thinking, in my dad's generation, the owner's manual of the car told you how to adjust the valves. And today, the owner's manual says basically don't drink the gasoline, that type of thing. But it's true, though. We all think that we've got it so hard and we've got it so difficult. We all think from where we sit and the things that are ahead of us, they seem insurmountable. There's no way we're going to get there. And I can remember feeling that same thing. I felt like, Mom and Dad, they just waltzed right into life. They waltzed right into a home. Dad told me years ago, I think it was in the 1990s, we were talking. He said, it was a stretch. I paid $12,000 for this house. $12,000 for the house? Are you kidding me, Dad? And so in my mind, I said, I could buy a couple of those houses, It might take me a couple of years. I could buy a couple of those, Dad. Why'd you just buy one? We tend to see a picture of someone's life, and we tend to extract from that it must be easy. This is what I loved about American Underdog. Because you got to see how the sausage was made. You got to see how the hero was made. And I think a lot of times, as you and I go through life, we assume some things. And there's been memes that popped up over the last couple of days. Hey, I'm hoping for a fantastic 2022. 2021 was rough. It was bad. But 2022, it's going to be great. And I said, I ain't so sure about that. In fact, if we're going to be realistic, I remember a friend of mine telling me one time, that which can't go on will not go on. I'm sorry, I was reading the other night, and I was reading a Twitter post from a farmer, and he was talking about, he took a picture of fertilizer, and he said, last year at this time, I bought this, and he told how much money he paid. This year, I paid this much for the same amount. It was more than double of what he had paid for the same amount. And then he referenced another item that he had bought. This morning, I'm not going to bury the lead. I don't want you to sleep going into 2022. I want you to be alert. I want you to be aware of what's going on. I want you to be ready. I want you to do your part and then pray and depend on God like it all depends on Him. But so many people are just going to go into 2022 and they say, God's going to just handle it all. And we say, for us to do anything, for us to put our fingers in it, is going to gunk things up. I'm amazed at how many times people, they take on God's job and they give God their job. When I would be doing something, a chore or something, when my boys were little, they would always want to do the thing that looked the easiest, but that was actually the hardest. And I would want them to do the thing that looked the hardest, but that was actually the easiest. And they would be confused about those two things. This morning, I want you to do something that looks hard, but is actually a lot easier than doing God's part. See, there are some things you can't do. You can't save yourself. You can't work enough, swim long enough, hard enough to save yourself. But there are some things you can do. And what ends up happening, people try to say, well, my good works, the things I do, that will be enough to get me to heaven. And see, I'm of the conviction that what the Bible teaches, that I can't do enough to get to heaven. I'm going to let God do that part, that which I cannot do. But I should do the part that I can do. And because I believe in a free grace theology, that salvation is by grace alone, faith alone, in God alone, and what Christ has done, a lot of people mistake my thinking as, oh, well, then you say you just can do anything, you can behave any way possible. And do what? And get to heaven? Well, it all depends on Christ. But if you're doing just anything, you're going to end up in a very different place than if you did some things. And so this morning, I want us to look at a wisdom book. It's the oldest wisdom book that we have. It's the book of Proverbs. And I want us to look at two passages that are eerily similar to one another. And we'll look at first passage is Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. And in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, the writer of Proverbs, Solomon, who wrote most of these Proverbs, he tells his son, be careful of the way you get into financial engagements. Because the financial decisions you make can put a ruin on your finances, can ruin you financially. In fact, he says, don't be a cosigner, don't be a lender. When a neighbor comes to you and they have a very good problem, and you feel like, well, I can help them, be careful about that. Getting into that situation can cause you financial ruin. That's what he talks about in verses 1 through 5. But there's another part. That's involving somebody else. But there's something going on between your two ears, and there's a mentality that he says, watch out for. He says, go to the ant. There's a couple of things with that. Number one, he's commanding him to do that. Go. Here's what I want you to do. Go to the ant. So it's a command, first off, and then he says, go to the ant. You know, man has the ability to plan. Mankind has the ability to plan, to make decisions. Oh, horses don't do that. What are you doing next week? Let me check my schedule. Horse doesn't say that. Even maybe Mr. Ed might do that. But other than Mr. Ed, but he says, go to the ant. Now, I want us to notice here for a moment the ant. How insignificant. And he says, go to the ant, and he wants him to observe. Now, when we're going to observe an ant, we don't do it from standing up and looking. When we observe an ant, we get down real close. It's almost like a humility stance. And so he says, go to the ant, you slacker. The idea here, the Revised Standard Version and the New Living Translation says, go to the ant, you lazy bones. Some of you say, you sluggard. It's a person whose financial situation is directly connected to his inaction. He's not acting. He says, you go to the ant, you slacker, you sluggard, you lazy bones, you lazy person. He says, go to him, go within humility and observe its ways and become wise. What he's saying here, what he's telling his son to do, is that there's something an ant can teach you. Now think about that for a moment. There is something that an ant can teach you. There's something about our humanity and our fallen nature and our propensity that we need an ant, an insignificant creature, to teach us. And he says, observe its ways. And if you will do that, if you will watch an ant, and if you'll take the time, and if you'll get close enough and watch an ant and observe its ways, you'll become wise. There will be a benefit from the time you spend dealing with an ant and observing an ant. There'll be a benefit because he's got something to teach you. And the slacker, if you want to know the difference or the parallel between a slacker, the other aspect of that would be someone who is diligent. The antonym of a slacker would be somebody who's diligent, who's on the ball, who's got it in gear. This person doesn't have it in gear. He says, so go to the ant and look and observe, and you will become wise. He says, without a leader, without an administrator, without a ruler, without a parent, you might say, everything that this ant does, he doesn't have a leader telling him to do something. Well, he didn't tell me to do that. I discipline my kids and have to go with my kid. The grass will be this tall. Well, Dad, you didn't tell me to mow the grass. The ant would know to mow the grass. I'm just saying, the ant's that smart. So he doesn't have a leader. He doesn't have an administrator. He doesn't have a rule. He doesn't live his life waiting for somebody to tell him what to do. There are a lot of people in the U.S. of A. that are waiting for people to tell them what to do. Well, he didn't tell me to do that. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Trash cans running over. I didn't know I was supposed to empty it. But a lot of people are like that. He says, the ant prepares its provisions, its food in the summer when there's plenty of it. And it gathers its food during the harvest. The ant does the work of anticipating his future needs. Now imagine that. This small instinctual creature anticipates its future needs. In the summer, it's preparing for winter. And it gathers food during the harvest. You ask people, what's your retirement plan? I don't know. I signed some papers when I went to work here, and they said I was going to retire. I don't know. Oh, the government, Social Security. Nothing wrong with Social Security. But what we've done, we've created a generation, a mentality to where we can just kind of coast along. We don't have to get it in gear. The ant doesn't do that. The ant doesn't have a government office to go to get its needs met. It has to meet it itself. And so he goes on down here and he says, how long will you stay in bed, you slacker? Because I got enough for today. Don't need to worry about tomorrow. How comfortable does that bed have to be? When will you get up from your sleep? When will you get up and do something? When will you act now so that your future looks different then? I was talking to a gentleman one time, and he said that one of his doctors had said that the things you do today, you really won't exercise-wise and that type of thing, you really don't fully realize those results for 7 years. I don't like that. I want to go outside and run, walk, crawl a mile. Take about 2 hours to do that. And next day, I want to be able to run a marathon. It doesn't happen that way. I want instant. The ant knows something is in the future. He says, when will you get up from your sleep? When will you act because you've got a future ahead of you? And then he goes on and he says this, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest. It is so comfortable. And he says, and your poverty will come like a robber. Your need like a bandit. When a robber comes up to you, when a bandit comes up to you, or the idea here is maybe a soldier who comes in, he doesn't say, okay, let me see what you got. Nice necklace, nice engagement diamond ring, $400 in your pocket, nice shoes. I'll tell you what, I'll take the ring and the $400. I'll leave you the necklace and the shoes. He doesn't say that. He gets it all. He gets it all. He wants everything, anything of value. And what Solomon is warning his son about is that when it comes, everything's nice and easy right now. But when it comes, because you haven't gotten it in gear, because you're not prepared, you're shocked. Why would anybody do that? Why would that happen? And so the first idea of financial gain, the lesson to be learned, is by looking at the ant. He's going to give this very same lesson some 20 or some 18 chapters later. He's going to tell not the same story, because he's going to come at it from a different way, but he wants a different lesson. In Proverbs chapter 24, verses 30 through 34, he says, "So I went by the field of a slacker." Same word. He uses this word some 13 times in the book of the lazy bones guy. He says, "And by the vineyard of a man lacking sense." He ain't got no sense about him. Got no sense. Now, this guy's got a vineyard, and he doesn't have any sense, and he's a slacker. So, guess what the conclusion is? He probably inherited the vineyard. Vineyard takes a lot of work. A lot of work. And a vineyard, it can produce money. But he goes by the field, and by observing this dude's property, he can tell automatically he's a slacker. He can tell automatically he's lazy. Just by observing. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book some years ago called Blink. And what he said was, in that book, the observation was that we see more than we realize we see. We see with the physical eye and the rational eye, but there are things going on, and there's information that we take in that we don't realize we take in. They did this experiment. They would go to a person's room, and they would open the door for like 10 seconds. So you look into the room, look into the person's room, 10 seconds, and then you close the door. And then they had them write, what do you know about that person? Just from that. And they did this over and over again to different rooms and everything. And the study showed it was amazing, a 10-second glance, how much a person had observed and understood that person was like. What that person was like. What his personality was, or her personality was. It was amazing at that. And that's the way he begins this book, Blink. Solomon is doing the same thing here. He's looking at a vineyard, and he says, I can tell you right now, this guy's a slacker. This guy's a guy that he lacks sense. And the reason why, he's got so much potential, so much value in that vineyard. And yet, by looking at the vineyard, I can see that he hadn't taken advantage of it. So I went by the field of a slacker and by the vineyard. So a vineyard of a man lacking sense. You see the parallel here? The lazy person is the person that doesn't have his sense. It's the parallel going on there. And here's what he says. Thistles had come up everywhere. The thorns it was everywhere in this field. He says weeds covered the ground. Weeds were pervasively covering the ground. They are no value. You can't drink weeds. You can't eat weeds. They have no value. He says, and the stone wall was in ruin. A vineyard is a very valuable thing. And the word he uses here for this stone wall is not one that's mortared in place. It's rocks put upon another. But the reason you do that is to keep creatures out, keep people out, because the vineyard is very precious, because the vineyard is going to do something for you. The vineyard is going to produce and provide you a livelihood. The vineyard is going to do things for you financially and make it possible for you to live a good life. But he says, I see this vineyard, and there's thistles, there's weeds, the stone wall. There's been no maintenance at all. And I can tell if a person's willing to do that, number one, they did not work to build that. Number two, I can tell is they don't understand the value of what they have. I can tell that they must be lazy. They must be a sluggard. And then he goes here, I saw and took it to heart. I looked and received instruction. Now, In the original language, the word I is used 3 times. He isolates I. And what he's doing here is he's saying, this event had an effect on me. It raises the stakes. He says, I saw and took heart. I looked. And he's raising the stakes. He says, it's almost like God's giving you this great example. You know, you can learn from a bad example as well as a good example. You can learn what not to do as well as what to do. And he says, I received instructions. He received instructions from the ant. He received instructions from a desolate vineyard that had been let go in a certain way. And so he says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest, and your poverty will come like a robber, your need like a bandit. You will be left with absolutely nothing. But wait, let me find out whose fault it is. Let me find out whose fault it is. Do you know who says that? Immature people say that. It wasn't my fault. I'm not to blame. Yeah, but here's what we have. Okay, I'm going to start preaching now. Things are coming. Things are coming. Things are coming. Some of you aren't old enough. Many in here are old enough to remember the late 70s. Things are coming in 2022. I saw a meme where it has a first wave, and it says 2020, and then a bigger wave, 2021, and then Godzilla, 2022. And I'm not a prophet or the son of a prophet, but I can tell you this. Here's what people's reaction is going to be. Number one, it's not their fault. They're not responsible. And they're going to look to our leaders and say, we don't like those leaders. We're going to replace those leaders with these leaders, and then everything will be all right. And it won't be. You have a responsibility to you. Let's put on our big boy pants and big girl pants, and let's think about this for a second. You have to prepare for you. I don't like all gloom and doom. I am Pollyanna, like I said. But that which can't go on will not go on. And I just want to ask you, are you prepared? Are you smarter than an ant? Are you smarter than an ant? Be prepared. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just pray to God. And I'm going to pray and I'm going to pray. You let God do his part. But you do your part. God has given you reason, rationale. He's given you all of those. He's equipped you. And we live in the greatest country in America. I mean, greatest country in America. Greatest country in the world. Yeah, we live in the greatest county in America. No, the fact of the matter is you have to be prepared. And you can't look around and say, well, they told me, the government told me, or somebody told me if I just did this, it would be okay. You know better than that. You really do. And all of the wisdom of man to put things in place where you and I will never have to sit in a place where our temperature rests between 68 and 72 and everything's just fine. Let me tell you, it won't matter how good your cell service is if you don't have any food. It won't matter how high the cost of your cable bill is if you go to the market and there's nothing to eat. Because here's what's happened. When I go back to my son and he thinks, well, my generation has it harder than yours. The reason, and I think the greatest generation in my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, I can't imagine how hard they had it. But you know what? They prepared. They prepared. They were self-sufficient. And my message is just get it in gear. Don't just float through life. And that tension doesn't need to be there between what part do you do and what part does God do. Because let me tell you, you act like it all depends on you, and you trust like it all depends on Him. You do things and you make decisions because it's time to step in and be adults. It's time to grow up. Our parents and our grandparents grew up a lot quicker than our generation has grown up. A lot quicker. Boys 16, 17, 18 years old marching off to look down the barrel of a gun having a Nazi point a gun at them. They grew up quick. They grew up fast. And they provided a life for us that seemed to be easy. And somewhere along the way we've said, if we just get the right political party in charge, then everything will be all right. It won't. That's not the answer. Because you know what neither political party is willing to do? Neither political party is willing to turn to God. Neither one of them. Mark my word, neither one. One of them will use it, and I'm a member of one of them, and they'll use it. But neither political party. This year I heard all about Kwanzaa, and I didn't hear no mention of Christmas. Oh, we can't mention Christmas. One time I went to an ACLU meeting. Y'all are supposed to go, I went to an ACLU meeting, and I was there, and there was a professor from, what's the one in Nashville? Vanderbilt. A professor from Vanderbilt there. And he was talking to a teacher in our public school here in Orange County, and they said, well, because we were talking about religion. They were talking about religion. And they were saying, we celebrate winter break. We celebrate winter break. Oh, okay, that's good. You know, we want to be open to everyone and everything. We don't want to offend anybody, so winter break. And he said, well, what do you do about Kwanzaa? Oh, we celebrate Kwanzaa. We're talking about Kwanzaa. And what about Hanukkah? We do some Hanukkah, the lights and stuff. What do you do Christmas? Seriously, the teacher, she was from New Hope. And the reason I was at the meeting, our church was meeting at New Hope then. She said, we don't talk about Christmas. The professor from Vanderbilt said this, I would not say that's being religion neutral. I would say that's being anti-Christian. And you go, an ant could have said that. An ant could have known that. I'm telling you to do your part, to prepare. Because if you go into 2022 thinking, we've got a clean slate, we get to start new, and everything's going to be, I'm hoping that 2022 is going to be just great. It's going to be fantastic. The fact of the matter is you're going to be sorely disappointed. And when you look back, it was like, all the signs were there. All the signs were there, and I just chose to ignore it. Why? Because it's easier to be a sluggard. It's easier to be lazy. It's easier to let somebody else worry about it. It's easier to do that. The reason God gives us this stuff in His Word is to wake us up. Stating the obvious. You and I are so blessed, but we've got to get it in gear. We've got to get it in gear. And the reason that we get it in gear and the reason we do the things we do is so we can help other people. It's not so we can say, look at here, I got it all, you don't have any. Now, I have an exit strategy. I'm hoping the exit strategy is God says, come on, it's time to wrap this baby up. And I'm saying, yeah, baby, I'm all for that. I am all for that. But get it in gear. Act wisely. Let me tell you something. Your credit card right now, if you have a credit card and you've got money out there standing on your credit card and you're paying 21% interest, you're going to wish for the day you had 21% interest on a credit card. Get it in gear. Do what you have to do. Prepare. Make decisions. Be an adult about living your life. And then you ask God, bless this, bless my efforts, God. God, it's hard. Bless my efforts. You do your part. God will do His. You do your part, God will do your. Let God do the things that you can't do, but you better do the things that you can do. Whether that comes to defending your home, protecting your home, providing food. But what about my cable bill? Guess what? My grandparents didn't have a cable bill. My great-grandparents didn't have a TV. You can live without a TV. You can live without a cell phone. You can't live without food. Just saying. See, this is not the kind of message I wanted to preach for the first of the year. But it might just be the kind of message that you need to hear. Let's pray. Father, I pray that we would get it in gear, that we would understand that we are so blessed. We are a people that have been so blessed. And that we would take the responsibility that you've given us. We would learn from those things around us. Scripture tells us to look and observe the way you have put these teachings all around us. Father, the tragedy of Barney Fife was he was sleeping on the job. It's okay to sleep when you're supposed to sleep. But it's not okay to sleep when you're supposed to be awake. It's not okay to sleep when others are depending on you. Father, may we be an example of people who work like it all depends on us, but who pray and believe and embrace knowing that it all depends on you. For it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.